This is the Architect Exam Podcast, the official podcast of the Young Architect Academy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Architect Exam Podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today about a topic that most people want to take a nap about, which is insurance. Very exciting, I know, but don't skip yet. Don't hit that skip button. I promise I am going to make this information as painless as possible. And you're definitely going to need to know some of the information I'm going to share with you today if you are studying for your AREs or even just as a licensed professional. So stick with me. Today, we're diving into the world of architectural insurance, what kinds you'll need, and who needs what. And we'll go over some tricky scenarios that always seem to pop up on the exams. I know. Try to contain all of your excitement, but seriously, this is like learning how to use a fire extinguisher. It's really boring until you absolutely need one. Insurance questions are going to show up all over the ARE, and it can be on any division. They especially show up on the practice and project management tests. So it's really great to have a good understanding of these insurance types and who carries what. So let me start with a story to tell you why knowing insurance and policies and who carries what is so important. Early on in my career, when I was working for an architecture firm, I was working on a renovation project for an old building in downtown. It was a beautiful building, a beautiful space, great client. Everything was going smoothly until one night, late at night, an electrical fire broke out this was happening while the project was still under construction and happened at night, and there was a lot of damage done. But thankfully, nobody was hurt. There was about $20,000 worth of damage, and the consequence to that is the next day, everyone started finger pointing, and everyone wanted to know what we should do next. And the owner was starting to blame the contractor, and then the contractor was starting to blame my electrical engineer, and everyone was looking at me like, so whose insurance is covering this? What do we do next? And it just started to really seem like an expensive game of not me, not my responsibility. And everyone was expecting me to be the referee of this situation. And honestly, in the moment, I had no idea what to do. I was just standing there thinking, they definitely didn't cover this in architecture school. I don't know who does what. So that's exactly why I'm very passionate about this topic and want to talk to you about it today. I don't want any of you standing in my shoes in that situation and having that, deer caught in the headlights moment the way that I did. And Mike and I were just talking about this topic last week, how so many ARE candidates get tripped up on insurance questions because they may feel disconnected from insurance questions because it really doesn't have a lot to do with design and the design world that we're used to and we love. But trust me, it's very important to understand this stuff, especially in the field and conducting site visits. If something happens, it really helps to know who covers what and how much is covered. And just knowing the different insurance types will help everything be easier to navigate. Before we dive in, I've created a free 2-pager PDF study notes that condenses all this riveting insurance information into a document that is so exciting, you might need to read it sitting down. You can grab this miracle PDF at youngarchitect.com/insurance. It's basically like having a tiny little insurance agent in your pocket, but a lot less weird. It's nice to have all of these notes just kind of in a condensed PDF that you could quickly reference. So next, let's break down insurance. Who needs what and what type and how much coverage? Let's think about this information like a road trip. Different people have different responsibilities to make sure the journey goes smoothly. First up, let's start with what you will need as an architect. As a licensed architect or as an architecture firm, you will need to carry professional liability and errors and omissions insurance. This is also commonly called E&O insurance, and it is an absolute must-have. This is your main insurance policy as a practice. This policy is like having a really expensive umbrella that you hope you never have to open, but you'll be so glad you have it when it starts pouring lawsuits. So think of E&O insurance as the architectural equivalent of copies of something random here, something like your baby photos. Your parents might keep these as a keepsake. You don't always want to look at them, but you're really glad that someone has them and they're keeping them safe for you just in case. So E&O insurance, it protects you as the licensed architect from someone who may be making a claim against you and claiming that you made a mistake while giving your architectural services and professional services. So, for example, maybe one of your structural calculations were off on your drawings, or perhaps you specified the wrong material in your specifications. Even if you are so strict and dedicated and into your details of your drawing sets and documents, even if you're super careful, no set of drawings are perfect and mistakes happen. And that's why this policy exists. It's to cover you in the event of those mistakes. Did you know that most E&O claims against architects don't even involve actual errors? They're often just allegations that get settled, and that way you can just avoid costly litigation, which is wild. It's not even, it's not even that you've made an error and that you're trying to fix it. They're often just allegations that you will solve through mediation. I remember in our boot camp just last month that we had a great discussion about E&O insurance, and a lot of our boot campers were confused about when the coverage actually kicks in. It's a real common sticking point. So E&O insurance is going to kick in and provide you protection in the case that any allegations are made against you and your work. So next up is general liability insurance. This is an essential insurance type as a licensed architect running your own firm. Think of this as your protection against just everyday occurrences or maybe some accidents. For example, someone other than your staff, not part of the architecture firm, could trip over your laptop cord while you're set up at a job site somewhere. Or maybe you are completing as-builts of a project at someone's home and you accidentally knock something over and break a really expensive vase or something like that. This type of coverage will protect any losses or claims that come with the day-to-day of running an office, and most offices carry general liability insurance. Next, let's go over workers' compensation, which is also carried by architects and architecture firms. This is going to cover your employees and your staff if they are injured on the job. Even if you're just a one-person show, such as myself, where you're just a kind of one-person architecture firm, keep in mind that if your practice grows over time and you have more people involved in your company, that you will need this coverage as well. And if you have a large team and you have several people working at a company and you have people visiting multiple job sites and, putting themselves in a position where injury may happen, you will need this type of insurance to cover your staff and cover your employees in the event that they get hurt on a job site or somewhere else while working for your company. So those three types are the types of insurance policies that you are required to hold as a business and as a functioning architecture firm. It ensures that you are covered in case anything goes wrong as you conduct business. There are also project-specific policies that might be required for certain job types. Lorenzo does a fantastic breakdown of all of these types of scenarios in his objective videos in the ARE 101 courses. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but he explains it a lot better than I could. Just remember that when it comes to insurance limits, that this is something the boot campers often ask us about. There is coverage amounts, which the standard starting point is usually about 1 million per occurrence and 2 million aggregate. Honestly, the right amount depends on the project type and the risk exposure that you may have working on that project.
You're listening to the Architect Exam Podcast, your guide to passing the ARE.
So next, let's switch gears and talk about what contractors need to have as they work on a project. This is important because you will need to know what to verify when you're administering a construction contract. So essentially, when you are doing construction administration, it is imperative to know what the contractor's insurance policies are covering. So what kind of insurance types do contractors need? Let's start with builder's risk insurance. This is a big one. This covers the building and materials during construction. So, for example, in the fire scenario that I gave earlier, when the fire broke out overnight, this would have been the primary policy that handles that damage and covers it. Next up, general liability for contractors. It works similarly to what architects carry for their businesses, but typically it has much higher limits because of the physical nature of contractors and a construction company's work. There's just a lot more risk associated when you have a large crew, physically building a project. There's a higher risk involved. So their policies are, they have much higher limits, much larger policies because of that risk. And because of that, they also have workers' compensation. And it's absolutely crucial, especially on construction sites, because construction sites are dangerous and injuries happen. So this is a big policy for contractors and construction companies again. So one thing to remember for the ARE exam and just in real life, contractors also need to ensure that their subcontractors that they are hiring also carry proper insurance. This comes up in multiple practice questions that we've created in our Project Management 101 course, so be sure to take a look at that. And next, let's not forget the third party involved here on projects, which are the owners. The project owners need to carry insurance policies as well. So typically, owners will need their own property insurance for their project site and the land that their project and construction project will live on. This usually kicks in after construction is complete. Their property insurance will cover them in the event of any loss or damage that happens after construction is complete. That's because the builder's risk insurance is covering the construction, any risk or loss that may happen during construction. And then once construction is complete, this is when the property insurance will kick in. So during construction, owners might need insurance if they're also occupying part of the building while construction is still happening on other parts of the building. So that also needs to be considered. There might be a hybrid of the two happening simultaneously. For larger projects, you might see owner-controlled insurance programs. This is where the owner purchases coverage for everyone involved on the project. And this can usually streamline things, especially when claims arise, because everything is kind of in this umbrella understanding of who covers what. I've noticed this concept trips up a lot of candidates in our CDT 101 course, probably because insurance plays a role in every phase of the project, from pre-design all the way through to construction and even beyond. So understanding this is crucial. Definitely do a lot of reading on this. So now that we understand who needs what type of insurance, let's go over some real world scenarios that will help this information stick so that you are well prepared for exam day. So let's better understand how insurance plays a role in our jobs on the day-to-day. Our first scenario here is, let's consider an owner-built project. Imagine a homeowner deciding to be their own general contractor for a small kitchen renovation that you helped design for them. Who needs the insurance policy here? Now, you as the architect would still need your professional liability and your general liability to cover you and your work and any potential errors and omissions that comes with that small renovation project. But the homeowner needs to carry their own special builder's risk coverage. That's because they're opting to be their own GC for this job. So they, instead of a contractor, needs to have that builder's risk coverage. And they might even opt for an enhanced homeowner's insurance policy during construction because they already live in this home, they already occupy the home, they probably already have property insurance and homeowner insurance, but they might need to let their insurance company know that they're about to GC their own project. So there's some special language that needs to be put in their coverage policy to protect them in case something goes wrong. Also, in this owner-built project scenario, any subcontractors that the owner decides to hire to help them complete the work would also need to carry their own general liability as a company, as a business, and subcontractors would also have to carry their own workers' comp to cover their crew that may be arriving on this job site to complete work because there is still a risk for injury or harm while they're working on this job site. So the tricky part in this scenario is if something goes wrong, the homeowner might not understand all of these requirements. And I always advise architects working on these types of projects to clearly document any insurance recommendations that they make to the homeowner that's trying to DIY their own job. Document, document, document. This is so important. It might seem like a lot of work to do at the upfront, but it's really going to help you in the long run in case any, allegations come up. So let's look at another common scenario when it comes to insurance coverages. And this is a standard contractor-led project, which is the standard design, bid, build project type, or project delivery type, I should say. So the contractor in a design, bid, build scenario would carry builder's risk for the job type. They would also carry general liability and workers' comp for their business and for their crew as a functioning business. The architect would also have their own professional liability and general liability policies that they carry just as a functioning business on the day-to-day. And the owner is going to have their standard property insurance that protects their home and their project. This is kicking in after construction is complete. So where it gets interesting here is when the contractor, let's say, damages any existing conditions on the property, let's say part of the home or part of the project was existing, or maybe utilities are existing. For instance, if they break a water pipe and accidentally flood the owner's existing property or basement, the contractor's general liability policy should cover this. So that's why they really need to make sure that their limits are high enough to cover this type of loss. Mike and I were reviewing a case like this just last month in boot camp, and it's a perfect example of why understanding insurance is so important in practice. It's not just to get the question right during the exam. It's really important to know, the scale of loss or the scale of risk, and then having the right insurance policy and the right quantity in place to cover you in case that loss happens. So it's really important to understand this in practice, not just for the exam. But what about when things get really complicated? Let's talk about when multiple parties are involved in a claim. So in this scenario, things can get really messy. I'll give an example of something really tragic, which is what if a balcony collapses on a newly built building? The owner may react in this situation and want to sue everyone: the architect, the general contractor, all of the subcontractors who were involved, the structural engineer that the architect consulted with to create the balcony design. Suddenly, you're in this legal battle with all of these players and subcontractors involved and consultants. It's almost like the architectural version of Game of Thrones, minus the dragons. But then again, lawyers can breathe fire too, so maybe there are dragons involved. What happens next in this type of situation where there's multiple parties with allegations against them and they all become involved? Each party who is being sued by the owner in this situation, they all have their own insurance policy and their own insurance company that's covering them. And in this situation, the insurance company is going to come in and defend the person being sued. They're going to defend them and act on behalf of that party. And this is done because the insurance company also wants to limit the liability of the person that's being accused of doing wrong and having issues or having errors in their work. So as an architect, this is when our E&O, our errors and omissions policy, is kicking in, and our insurance company is actually going to assign a lawyer and legal counsel to investigate whether our design and our documents contributed to this balcony actually failing. So from that point, the legal route, based on that research and that investigation, it might go to mediation. It might get really big and go to litigation. But the first step in an incident like this is to go straight to your insurance company and get that legal counsel assigned to you and have them start investigating and defending on your behalf. And, this happens with the contractors team and the subcontractors team as well. Essentially, their insurance companies come in and defend them on their behalf to start doing the investigation of whose fault it actually was. And at this point, this is where those hold harmless clauses become really, really important in our contracts, and how those clauses are added in and written to cover us based on the project type and the risk involved. So be sure to study up on hold harmless clauses and how they're worked into our contracts as architects. I remember when I was studying for the ARE that these multiple party scenarios were the most confusing part of insurance questions. Our Practice Management 101 course has some great practice questions about exactly this that we really like to walk you through every kind of situation so that you can understand what the next steps are.
You're listening to the Architect Exam Podcast, the official podcast of the Young Architect Academy.
So next, let's talk about the financial side of insurance, because let's face it, this stuff is not cheap. So next, let's talk about the cost of insurance and the fact that that should be factored into your fees as an architect. Insurance policies are an absolute legitimate business expense, and it should be considered and essentially worked into your fee as an architecture firm so that you can cover those costs. Professional liability might cost anywhere from 2 to 5% of your gross revenue. So that is a significant chunk. You don't want to forget to charge for that in your fees and then have to pay all of that without getting yourself fully covered. There's also business insurance and versus project insurance. This is another concept that shows up on the exam. So there are, the insurance policies that are covering you as a running business on the day-to-day, whether you have an active project or not. You will need to carry the, professional liability and errors and omission insurance, but you may also opt to get additional custom add-on policies based on project type, whether there's high risk based on location or building type or scale. You may get project-specific policies just for one job in addition to your existing policies. So next, let's talk about some legal terms that you will need to understand for both the exam and just in real practice when you get insurance for your own company. The first is subrogation. Subrogation is when your insurance company will actually pay a claim that is being made against you. Then they are going to pursue the responsible party to recover the cost. So let's say that there is a claim against you, and in order to close the claim and, basically nip it in the bud, your insurance company may actually make that payment to whoever is making that allegation against you as the licensed professional. But if you and the insurance company know that the origin of this issue was from one of your consultants or one of your subcontractors, after you've put that initial issue to bed, you may actually have your insurance company go and try to recoup the loss of having to make that payment by suing the subcontractor or subconsultant that you hired that you believe was the origin of that issue. So to kind of give a real world example to make this a little bit easier to understand, if my car insurance fixes my car for me after someone hits me, they might just do that to kind of, get me back in my car, get me back on the road with my fixed car. But then my insurance is actually going to go after that driver who hit my car and try to recoup the loss of having to pay for my car getting fixed. So my car insurance company would actually get in touch with the car insurance company of the person who hit me and try to recoup their loss. So that can happen in architecture as well. When there's multiple parties involved, they may pay that loss and then try to recoup it later. And that is subrogation. So next is the hold harmless clause, which we kind of went over quickly before. This is a provision when one party agrees not to hold another party legally liable for something that may go wrong. So this is common when working with consultants or maybe two firms working as a joint venture. If an issue arises, they will work together to try to find the solution, but the architect actually cannot be held liable because there was terms put in place and language put into the contract to hold them harmless and protect them in case an issue arises. So these are huge in architectural contracts and great to have up front to make it clear that if an issue arises that, of course, you're going to be there to communicate to figure it out, but they can't immediately turn to go and sue you and make claims against you because this was an agreement made before the work even started. Indemnification is also huge in architectural contracts. This is taking the hold harmless clause even just a step further. And this is when one party agrees to cover the other's losses. So these are provisions that I could talk about for hours, and they really need to be properly understood and carefully reviewed. I know that some of this language, the subrogation, hold harmless, indemnification, this type of terminology when it comes to insurance and coverages, it could maybe cause some of your eyes to glaze over. I know they definitely did for me when I was studying. These terms sound like they were invented, specifically to make architects fall asleep during their exams while studying. But stick with me. Get a coffee. We're going to get through this together. Understanding this is crucial, obviously, for the ARE exam, but just protecting you as a licensed professional working and living in the real world. So what you really need to know for the ARE and on exam day, be familiar with coverage limits, know the standard amounts, but also understand that limits should be proportional to project size and a project's complexity. Also, be sure to know documentation practices. You'll often see questions about what to document and when to document them. You should always err on the side of more documentation because documentation is going to be your BFF. The more detailed you could be, the more it will save you in the event of a claim. Your future self will thank you when you're trying to remember why you specified something on a drawing or if there was a weird hardware you needed. You might draw something and it doesn't actually get built till 5 years later. So documentation is what's going to help you remember. If documentation was a dating profile, it would be reliable, detail-oriented, and save you from expensive lawsuits. So you would definitely want to swipe right on documentation. Some key terms to know when it comes to insurance policies and coverage are deductibles, premiums, endorsement, additionally insured, certificate of insurance, and claims. So be sure to study up on your vocabulary when you're reading and learning about insurance policies, because the ARE loves to test you on who needs what insurance and when. They'll give you a scenario and then ask you which policy you should respond with in that specific incident. So actually, Mike, Layla, and I created over a dozen practice questions about insurance. They appear throughout our ARE 101 course to help you master these concepts. Insurance comes up so much more than candidates expect. Hey, are you still awake out there? Just checking. This is the part where our tiny little pocket insurance professor agent, our little PDF, is going to come in handy. That we're trying to wave our arms frantically, trying to get your attention. Trust me. This is more important than trying to understand all of our case studies that we see on our ARE exams. I know those are challenging too, and we need to figure those out. But I promise you this information about insurance, it's going to help you in the exams. It's going to help you throughout the rest of your professional career. So definitely have your little trusted agent close to your pocket. And here's the bottom line today. Insurance might seem a little boring, maybe not as exciting as our design world when we design. It is your first defense. It is the first step when something goes wrong at work. It's your safety net if things go sideways. So think of insurance like the guardrails on a curving, winding mountain road. You don't really appreciate them until you need them. So insurance really is your friend who thinks of the worst case scenario all the time, always carries an umbrella, a first aid kit with them, and knows how to change a tire. You might kind of roll your eyes and think it's overkill, but if it's pouring rain out and you've got a flat tire, suddenly that person who overthinks is your best friend in the world. So to recap, just remember that architects need professional liability, general liability at a minimum for projects. Contractors need to carry builder's risk, general liability, and workers' compensation. Owners are going to need property insurance, and sometimes if they're their own GC, they're going to need special builder's risk construction coverage. And everyone needs to understand how these policies interact when there's maybe a situation where there's multiple parties making claims. I hope this talk today helped to demystify some insurance coverages, policies, and informations. I hope you feel a little bit better prepped for your ARE exams and your future practice. Don't forget to grab that free 2-pager PDF study notes that I mentioned. It's at youngarchitect.com/insurance. It has all of these key points that I just made as a quick reference guide that you can use while studying. I recommend printing it out, putting it up on your wall so you can see it really easily. This is your little pocket insurance professor. And after all this coffee that I've just had, and I'm kind of rambling about subrogation and hold harmless clauses, I insist that you make this documentation and knowledge of insurance your BFF. You will not be disappointed that you did. And if you're struggling with the architect exam, remember that our ARE bootcamp breaks everything down into bite-sized pieces that help make it manageable. And we like to approach everything as a step-by-step, week-by-week approach so that you're not overwhelmed. And we actually want you to learn these items and this information. We don't want you to just memorize it. You'll be meeting with me at boot camp, Mike, Lorenzo, Layla, and we all work really hard to just kind of get everyone in the place and the mindset they need to be for these exams. We've helped thousands of candidates make real progress on their journey to licensure. I'm one of them. I took boot camp myself. So thanks for listening, everyone. Good luck on your exams. You've got this.
Thanks for listening to the Architect Exam Podcast. Ready to take your studying to the next level? Visit our online ARE Architecture School website at academy.youngarchitect.com to learn more about how we can help you. See you next time.